Final Fantasy XIV is in a strange place in its history. Despite much of the community being less than thrilled about the post-launch support for 2021's Endwalker expansion, the game is nonetheless still gaining in popularity, hitting 30 million accounts this year, and the release of patch 6.55, essentially a prologue to the next expansion, Dawntrail, came with a huge wave of fan support for new party member Wook Lamont. The hype is huge, even if the game itself is coming off a bit of a rough spot.
Crazy pixel.
Dawntrail is coming a bit later than usual, as the effects of COVID threw a permanent wrench into the game's development cycle, and releasing a full, numbered Final Fantasy title by the same creative team probably pushed it back even further. This expansion has some pretty heavy expectations to fulfill in order to maintain the momentum of the game's increasing player base, but if my short time with the preview build was any indication, I think it's going to be a good summer. For those that don't understand how this works, each expansion cycle for the game has featured a media tour event, where journalists and content creators have a chance to get a small taste of the full release over the course of a few hours. What I got to experience was a set of 3 zones, those being the city of Tuliolal and 2 of its surrounding areas, which were populated with the usual monsters, hunt, and fate events, but no story content at all. We had the chance to experience every single job at the new level cap, including the new Pictomancer and Viper, and play through the first dungeon of the expansion with our fellow creators. While there were others who focused on areas of their own expertise, I decided to try and see a little bit of everything, starting with the city of Tuliolal. It's the new primary hub for those who have not yet completed Dawntrail's story, similar to Old Sharlayan in Endwalker or the Crystarium in Shadowbringers. Like those cities, it's a pretty large area that's spread out over different elevation levels, and visually reminded me of a mix between Sharlayan and the villages surrounding Stormblood's Ruby Sea. All of the NPCs were placeholders, so really all I got to do was give it an aesthetic look over, but it certainly shows off the game's new graphical update well. Most exciting for me was that all of this elevation gave me plenty of opportunity for my favorite idle time activity, which is jumping off of tall cliffs. The 2 zones were pretty typical affairs for early game areas, but I was excited to come across several A-rank hunts that let me team up with folks around me. The first one, which we actually beat with only one not quite full team, was a massive bee that would alternate between telling players to stay away and come close, with the added twist of forced movement timers in random directions. Failure was punished by instant death, but that just made it all the more fun as the dance, as I like to call it, felt high stakes, and a huge cheer went up between us in the room as we downed it. Unfortunately, we got particularly unlucky with the second hunt we located, and even though we, and by we I mean my seat neighbor, YouTuber Wes Galber, figured out the mechanics of the fight on the first pull, we seemed to have accidentally found it just as it was about to despawn, and as soon as we wiped, it was gone. This gave me a bit of a break to start figuring out the 2 new jobs. Pictomancer gear looks absolutely ridiculous on a huge male Hrothgar, but the job itself is a bit of a beast. It effectively features 2 skill rotations that weave into each other, with its main 2 combos being supplemented and tied into the gradual combo of painting pictures and unleashing their abilities to grant buffs and paint in your gauge. You can consume part of the gauge to change the spell colors, powering them up, and this also affects the combo finisher, turning it from holy and white to the even more powerful comet in black. It feels a little like the resource building and management of Red Mage, but with significantly more complexity, something that Red Mage is notably lacking, particularly since the only update they get in patch 7.0 is that they get yet another finishing move, albeit one that requires you to use Manification first. Pictomancer is visually exciting, looking like absolutely nothing else in the game, and that makes me very eager to learn it from the ground up once patch 7.0 launches. Viper is more of a traditionally flashy affair, with single target and area of effect combos that look much more difficult than they actually are to execute. The player essentially wants to get 2 different buffs that lie at the end of each combo path, and this allows them to seriously pop off with one of the most satisfying finisher combos I've ever used. It alternates global cooldown abilities with off cooldown ones, basically meaning you just get to hit button after button as badass dual blade slashes fill the screen. I think I got the basic hang of it, but I would not be surprised if there were hidden complexities that a more expert tier player would enjoy discovering. The final piece of the puzzle was the first dungeon, which excitingly was the one we saw in the sizzle reel that involved a boat chase. It's not ultimately much different from sequences like the train fight at the beginning of the Tower of Babel, but it is a fun way to lead into the first boss fight, which established quickly that Dawntrail would be sticking to the pattern of a steady increase in base level content complexity. I know better than to spell out mechanics verbatim, but they were appropriately easy to follow and fun to maneuver as things begin to pile up on top of each other. Of course, one of the most fun aspects of the game's dungeons now is playing them with the duty support system, allowing you to be joined by the characters that canonically participated in that story beat. The Warrior of Light is here accompanied by Alphino as usual, but also Kryl for the very first time, and newcomer Wuklamot. I didn't learn a ton of new information about either, as the combat banter the party shares is pretty lightweight, but given that none of the field NPCs were feeling talkative in this preview, I definitely looked forward to the touch of personality I got from hanging out with the Scions. The other bit of fun I had was in trying on all of the new job gear and taking in the environment, just to have a look at how much the game's visuals have improved in this expansion cycle. Keeping in mind that A Realm Reborn celebrated its 10-year anniversary last year, and the original Long Dead 1.0 version of Final Fantasy XIV even older than that, the game was definitely beginning to show its age. But even with the update not finalized, the new benchmark with the updated character models not having been ready yet at the time, I was easily able to see a lot of the improvements for myself. I frequently poke fun at the yarn hair look of Final Fantasy XIV, which has certainly gotten overall flashier in the last few years, but it's largely through more detailed and massive foes and environments. Now we finally get an all-around glow-up, and I wanted to have a look at several of the more elaborate outfits. First off, the Red Mage gear, which is made mostly of velvet that now beautifully captures light from every angle and a perfect representation of its real-world counterpart. The Samurai outfit features many metal pieces that shine much more realistically in the bright sun, and the Machinist gear has a lot of leather pieces that demonstrate a significant improvement in the game's texture quality, looking as rough as the real thing. Dawntrail is only a few short weeks away from launch, and given what I've gotten to experience here, I might be even more excited than I was for Endwalker as a baby first-year game reviewer. Where the last expansion was a grand finale to everything that had come before, Dawntrail looks to be exactly the refreshing shakeup the game needs to shake off its cobwebs and push into the modern generation. It looks like my summer vacation is just beginning. Final Fantasy XIV Dawntrail releases in early access, available to all pre-orders on June 28th for PC, PlayStation 4 and 5, and Xbox Series consoles, with the full release on July 2nd. Thanks for watching. This video is brought to you by our supporters on Patreon. Noisy Pixel is run by a group of gamers providing independent gaming coverage through news, reviews, previews, and more. Check out our Patreon to help support our continued growth, and subscribe to keep up with all of our future content.
Nice.
Noisy Pixel.